I have some extremely top secret information that I would like to share with you. So the president has a cabinet officer to the commanding general and from senator to executive assistant. These men have their sources of information and guidance. Most of their information and guidance is a result of carefully laid schemes and ploys to pressure groups. You can view this not only in the political powers that be, but you can also utilize it in entrepreneur and relationships amongst the social media. Not to mention any organized crime such as Black Lives Matter. In these influential groups, one of the most interesting and effective roles is that played by the behind the scenes, a faceless, nameless, ambiguous briefing officer. He is the man who sees the president, the secretary, the chairman, and the joint chiefs of staff almost every single day, and who carries with them the most skillful, detailed information. He's trained by years of experience in the precise way to present that information to assure its effectiveness. So they're skilled in delivering the messages and information to people. He comes meaning the narrative. I'm going to tell you A, B, C, D, E, but I'm going to get you to think D, E, Z, F. However I want you to believe, I'm able to tell you these information facts by painting the narrative for you, and then all of a sudden you believe what I say. He comes away day after day knowing more and more about the man he has been briefing and about what it is that the truly influential pressure groups at the center of power and authority are really trying to tell these key decision makers. So they're basically the liaison of communicator. In Washington, where such decisions shape and shake the world, the role of the regular briefing officer is critical. So we would like to know who is our current officer who's involved in this. Leaders of the government of the great power centers regularly leak information of all kinds to columnists, television and radio commentators, and to other media masters with the hope that the material will resurface and thus will influence the president, the secretary, the Congress, and especially you, the public. Now remember, we're talking in terms of not only the government now, but we're also speaking to social media influencers, Hollywood, and what other places that would utilize social media to influence you as the public. Those other inside pressure groups with their own briefing officers have direct access to the top men. So they have access to the top people with all the money. They do not have to rely upon the media, although they make great use of it. So the media is a pawn in the scheme to guide the masses. They are safe and assured in the knowledge that they can get to the decision maker directly. They want to get this information to the decision maker, whether it be in a movie set, whether it be the President of the United States of America, or whether it be to their boyfriend. They need no middleman other than the briefing officer, which you would really kind of look at it like the TMZ. Such departments of defense, state, and the CIA use this technique most effectively because they've been trained in it. However, now you have gossip kings like James and that other fool who thinks it's funny to play with people's lives. For 9 consecutive long years during these crucial days from 55 to 64, meaning you want to remember that I'm reading from a book that was written by a person from the old days before internet was really going like it is now. I was one of those briefing officers. Of course you were. He does everything. I had a unique assignment of being the focal point officer for contacts between the CIA and the Department of Defense on matters pertaining to the military support of the special operations of that agency. In that capacity, I worked with Alan and John Dulles, several secretaries of defense. In this case, these men were evil, and I'm assuming that the evil ones are currently in office since they're trying to start a war. Not to mention in social media and in Hollywood as well. There are all kinds of Dulles characters running around at this time. And chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as well as many others in key governmental places. My work took me to more than 60 countries and to CIA officers and covert activities all over the world. Funny how Gary Vaynerchuk is traveling all over the world. From such hotspots as Saigon to much more remote places as the South Pole. Yes, there have been secret operations in Antarctica. It was my job not only to brief these men, but to brief them from the point of view of the CIA, so that I might win approval of the projects presented and of the accompanying requests for support from the military in terms of money, manpower, facilities, and materials. I was during this time perhaps the most informed focal point. That would be me. I'm the most informed focal point at this time. Officer among the few people who operated in this very special area. The role of the briefing officer is quite effective and most influential, and in the CIA, specializing in the high art of top-level indoctrination. It cannot be expected that a John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson, a Nixon, or a following president will have experienced and learned all the things that may arise to confront him during his busy official life in the White House, meaning he's too busy looking at actual concerns to pay attention to the gossip train. Especially if your mind capability is minor, as in the case of Joe Biden. Meaning he has dementia and they're drugging him. So he basically has no clue what's going on. They're feeding him the information, but then they're also feeding the focal point person is feeding the media, etc., etc., etc. It cannot be expected that a Robert McNamara or a Melvin Laird, a Dean Rusk, or a William Rogers comes fully equipped to high office, aware of all matters pertaining to what they will encounter in their relationship with the Congo or Cuba, Vietnam or Pakistan, China or Russia, and the emerging new nations. These men learn about these places and the many things that face them from day to day, from an endless and unceasing procession of briefing officers. Meaning everybody's watching other countries, finding their government issues, and I don't know, I feel like in the old days they fed off of people's weaknesses, which I think is wrong. But that's how y'all operate as like claimed leaders. Henry Kissinger was a briefing officer. General J. Voigt was one of the best. Desmond Fitzgerald, Tracy Barnes, Ed Lansdale, and Brute Krulak in their own specialties were top briefing officers on subjects that until the publication of the Pentagon Papers, few people had ever seen in print or had ever even contemplated. Neck stab or something. One of these guys is no good. You can imagine my surprise when I read in 1971 issue on the Sunday New York Times and saw there among the Pentagon Papers a number of basic information papers that had been in my own files in the Joint Chiefs of Staff area of the Pentagon. Most of the papers of that period had been source documents from which I had prepared dozens, even hundreds of briefings for all kinds of projects to be given to top Pentagon officers. I wonder if you have my project. Not only had many of these papers been in my files, but I had either written many of them myself or had certain of the source documents used by men who did. Just to let you know, God's still doing it. And I'm an angel, and I am Jesus' lifetime. I thought you all were going to be excited. I thought you were going to want peace on earth and stuff. I thought everybody was going to be excited to hear that I talked to him. Apparently that's not the case. I was excited to tell everybody their futures and help them get to where they wanted to get to, whether you were a CIA agent or you were a Afghanistan person, a good one, or if you were this and you were that. The briefing officer with the staff officer writes the basic papers. He researches the papers. He has been selected because he has the required knowledge and experience. He has been to the countries and to the places involved. So we got to follow the trail of where Gary's been, and then you'll know where the suspicion is. He may know the principals in the case well. He is supposed to be the best man available for that special job. In my own case, I had been on many special assignments dating to Cairo and Tehran, the conference of the late 1940s, or late 1943, that first brought together the big four of the Allied nations of World War II: Franklin, Winston, Chiang Kai-shek, and Joseph Stalin. Stalin was bad. And Winston Churchill killed Roosevelt with poison. And Chiang Kai-shek was mean too, I think. The briefing officer reads all of the messages regardless of classification. I'd be interested in reading those. He talks to a number of other highly qualified men. He may even staff specialists spread out all over the world upon whom he may call at any time for information. Obama shows. Working in support of the focal point. The focal point, Obama shows, which I headed. There were hundreds of experts and agents concealed in military commands throughout the world who were part of a network I had been directed to establish in 55 to 56 as a stipulation of the National Security Council Directive 5412, March 1954. In government official writing, the man who really writes the paper, or more properly, the men whose original work and words are put together to become the final paper, are rarely, if ever, the men whose names appear on the paper. A paper attributed to Maxwell Taylor, Robert McNamara, or Dean Rusk of the Kennedy era would not, in almost all instances, have been written by them, but more than likely would have been assembled from information gathered from the Departments of Defense and State and from CIA sources and put into final language by such a man as General Krulak, who was among the best of the breed of official writers. That sounds suspicious. Y'all are suspicious. Meaning all history is fake. From 55 through 63, if some official wanted a briefing on a highly classified subject involving the CIA, I wonder what they know, I would be one of those called upon to prepare the material and to make the briefing. At the same time, if the CIA wanted support from the Air Force for some covert operation, so there's a lot of secret things we don't know about, I was the officer who had been officially designated to provide this special operational support to the CIA. If I was contacted by the CIA to provide support for an operation, which I believe the Secretary of Defense had not been previously informed of, I would see to it that he got the necessary briefing from the CIA or from my office, and from any other chief of staff who might be involved would get similar briefings. In his unusual business, I found rather frequently that the CIA would be well on its way into some operation that would later require military support before the secretary and the chiefs had been informed. During preparations for one of the most important of these operations in some of detail in this book, I recall briefing the chairman of Joints of Staff, Lemnitzer, on the subject of the largest clandestine special operations of the CIA had ever mounted up to that time, and then hearing him say to the other chiefs, "I just can't believe it. I never knew that." Lies. That's a lie. Here was the nation's highest ranking military office, the man who would be held responsible for the operation should it fail or become compromised, and he had not been told enough about it to know just how it was being handled. He talks like this: doop, 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 doop. It's interesting, is all. Such is the nature of the game, as played by the soccer team, also known as a secret team. I've written for several magazines on this subject. Among them, the Armed Forces Journal, the New Republic, the Empire Magazine, of the Denver Sunday Post, and the Washington Monthly. He's just so smart. It was for this latter publication that I wrote The Secret Team, an article that appeared in the May 1970 issue, and that led to the development of this book. With the publication of the Pentagon Papers in 71, interest in the subject area was heightened and served to underscore my conviction, and the scope of that article must be broadened into a book, which is why he wrote the book, because he restored his integrity. Because you know that you did it. He was Within days of the New York Times publication of these Pentagon Papers, certain editorial personnel from the BBC TV program 24 Hours, recalling my Secret Team article, invited me to appear on a series on TV with, among those, Daniel Ellsberg. They felt that my experience with the Secret Team would provide material for an excellent companion piece to the newly released Pentagon Papers, which were to be the primary topic of the discussions. I flew to London and made a number of programs for BBC TV and radio. Legal problems and the possible consequences of his departure from the country at that time precluded the simultaneous appearance of Daniel Ellsberg. The programs got wide reception and served to underscore how important the subject of the Pentagon Papers is throughout the world. I've now chosen to reveal and to expose unreleased classified documents, but I do believe that those that have been revealed, both in the Pentagon Papers and elsewhere, need to be interpreted and fully explained. I'm interested in setting forth and explaining with secrecy and the cult of containment. Meaning, if you don't get information under control, people go crazy, which is why all this crap in all these different places is going on, because people are going nuts. Really mean, and what they have done to our way of life and our country, because we all want peace on earth, but not all people are good. Furthermore, I want to correct any disinformation that may have been given by those who have tried to write on these subjects and other related histories. I have lived this type of work. I know what happened and how it happened. I have known countless men who participated in one way or another in these unusual events of 20th century history. Many of these men have been and still are members of the Secret Team. It also explains why much of it has been pure propaganda and close to nationwide brainwashing of the American public. I intend to interpret and clarify these events by analyzing information already in the public domain. There is plenty. Few concepts during this half-century have been as important as controversial, as misunderstood, and as misinterpreted as secrecy in government, spilled into Hollywood, spilled into entrepreneur, spilled into social media, spilled into internet. No idea during this period has been a greater impact in government. No idea during this period has been a greater impact upon Americans and upon the American way of life than that of the containment of communism. Both are inseparably intertwined and have nurtured each other in a blind Pavlovian way. Understanding their relationship is a matter of fundamental importance. Much has been written on these subjects and on their vast supporting infrastructure, generally known as the intelligence community. Some of these historical writings have suffered from the serious lack of inside knowledge and experience. Most of these writings has been done by men who know something about the subject, by men who have researched and learned something about the subject, and in a few cases by men who had some experience with the subjects. Rarely is there enough factual information on the part of the writer. On the other hand, the government and other special interests have paid writers huge amounts to write about this subject as they want it done not truthfully. Thus, our history is seriously warped and biased by such work. Many people have been so concerned about what has been happening to our government that they have dedicated themselves to investigating and exposing its evils. Unfortunately, a number of these writers have been dupes of these cleverer than they or with sinister reasons for concealing knowledge. I just wanted to fall in love. They have written what they thought was the truth, only to find out, if they ever did find out, that they had been fed a lot of contrived cover story and just plain hogwash. In this book, I've taken extracts from some of these writings, and line by line have shown how it has been manipulated to give a semblance of truth while at the same time being contrived and false. And I've done that on my Truth Social page, and I've done that on my TikTok page, analyzing and showing you personalities. I'm on the secret team. Really? Nevertheless, there has been some excellent books in this broad area. But many of these books suffer from various effects of the dread disease of secrecy and from its equally severe corollary illness called cover. And I've been completely honest and have not covered anything up. The CIA's official euphemism for not telling the truth. The man who has not lived in the secrecy and intelligence environment, really lived in it and fully experienced it, cannot write accurately about it. There is no substitute for the day-to-day living of a life in which he tells his best friends and acquaintances, his family and his everyday contacts, one story while he lives another. I just don't say anything. Except to my mom, I tell her everything. Although she's like, I don't tell her everything. I don't tell her all this government stuff, but I do tell her the psychic stuff. The man who must depend upon research investigation inevitably falls victim to the many pitfalls of the secret world and of the cover story world with its lies and counter lies. Doop, 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 doop. A good example of this is the work of Leigh Gelb and his Pentagon associates in the official version of the Purloined Pentagon Papers. That very title is the biggest cover story of them all, so very few of those papers were really the Pentagon origin, and there's no pun intended. The fact that I had many of them in my Office of Special Ops and Joint Staff area, and that most of them had been in the files of the Office and the Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs, did not validate the locale of their origin. They were working copies and not originals. Notice how few were signed by true military officers. They're not signed by true military officers. It is significant to note that the historical record that has been called the Pentagon Papers was actually a formal government-funded study of the history of the U.S. involved in Vietnam from World War II to the present, 1945 to 68. In 1967, to the Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara, directed that work. A task force consisting of six times six professionals under the direction of Gelb produced 37 studies and 15 collections of documents in 43 volumes that were presented on January 15th of 1969 to the then Secretary of Defense, Mark Clifford, by Mr. Gelb, with the words from Herman Melville's Moby Dick. This is the world of chance, free-willed, and necessity, all interweavingly working together as one. Chance by turn rules either, and had the last featuring blow at events. As you may recall, this treasure trove of top secret papers was delivered to the New York Times and other newspapers in mid-June of '71 by a then-known hippie of that period. His name was Daniel Ellsberg. What few people have learned since that time is the fact that both Daniel Ellsberg, who pirated these highly classified papers, and Leslie Gelb, the director of that task force, had worked in the same Office of International Security Affairs. The misappropriation of these documents was not the work of some true patriots, as Noam Chomsky wrote in '72. Rather, it was an inside job. That ISA officer had been the home of many of the big names of the Vietnam War period, among them Paul H. Netze, John McNaughton, Paul Warnke, and William Bundy, among others. The fact that I had many of them in my office that I had worked with, and that I had written papers of some of them, proves that they were not genuine Pentagon papers, because my work at this time was devoted to support the CIA. The same is true for General Krulak, William Bundy, and to a degree Maxwell, among others. To look at this matter in another way, the man who has lived and experienced this unnatural existence becomes even more a victim of its unreality. He becomes enmeshed beyond all control upon the horns of a cruel dilemma. On the other hand, his whole working life he has been dedicated to the cause of secrecy and to its protection by means of cover stories, lies. In this pursuit, he has given of himself time after time to pledges, briefings, oaths, and deep personal conviction regarding the significance of that work. Even if he would talk and write, his life has been so interwoven into the fabric of the real and unreal, the actual and the cover story, that he would be at least likely to present the absolutely correct data. However, in a normal mind, you get lost in lies. You get so many lies. The lies become the truth becomes a lie, and then emotionally you start feeling a little confused about all of it too. On the other hand, and that is only for the unintelligent, because I'm going to tell you, just like in any other business, the CIA and all the other organizations have morons in them. And I'm going to tell you right now that Colonel Prouty is one of the most intelligent men I've ever seen. Not only that, I understand what he's saying. And God's telling me. And then I'm going to tell you, I'm going to stop this at 30 and send this into YouTube. On the other hand, as a professional, he would have been subjected to such cellularizations and compartmentalizations each time he became involved in any real deep operation that he would not have known the whole story anyhow. This compartmentalization is very real. I've worked on projects with many CIA men so unaware of the entire operation that they had no realization and awareness of the roles of other CIA men working on the same project. I would know of this because inevitably somewhere along the line both groups would come together to the Department of Defense for hardware support. Now that just sounds a little confusing for everybody. A whole group, and then you don't even collaborate, which means no one on Earth can thrive. I actually designed a special office in the Pentagon, but one door of the corridor inside it had a single room with one secretary. However, off her office, there was one more door that led to two more offices, with a third doorway leading to yet another office, which was concealed by the door from the secretary's room. So a hidden door. There's hidden doors. I found a hidden door. I had to do this because at times we had CIA groups with us who were not allowed to meet each other. What in the hell? And who most certainly would not have been where they had... Wait. And who... This is a CIA tactic. And who most certainly would not have been there had they known that the others were there. For the record, the office was 4D1000. It may have changed by now, but it had remained that way for many years. Well, what do y'all have to say about that so far? I'm going to stop this video. I'm going to upload it to YouTube. I'm going to put the preface as the title, and I'm going to continue reading through the preface because Prouty is having expectations this evening.